Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. This would actually mark my first time recording a video in like 3 years and my first time ever talking about something political on this YouTube channel. Anyways, today is Wednesday, February 18th, 2026, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Iowa, as I find it to be a fascinating state as Republican lawmakers in the state now push new bills trying to curb the powers vested in the governor's office after Kim Reynolds leaves. The Republicans' term is set to expire in January of next year, and these shameless dweeb Republican lawmakers now declare that they're going to be absorbing power from the governor's mansion in a move that really just does reveal the hand of the state. The hand of the party as they look ahead to the 2026 midterm elections, which honestly, if you think about it, shows that they know how fucked the GOP is coming up on the midterms this year. For a bit of context, however, the state of Iowa is a state that Donald Trump won in the last election by roughly 13 points. And for most purposes, there would never be any consideration or question about whether or not this state would vote for the Republicans come November of this year. Even though they have an incumbent in office who is, unpopular and deeply unlikable, but not unlikable to the degree that it dooms any Republican running in the race. And boy, do they have a long list of Republicans running for this office, including an incumbent U.S. representative from Iowa's 4th district. But the Republicans seem to be scared, regardless, scared enough now that they are changing the laws surrounding the abilities of the governor in the state. And really, they would never want to strip their own party of extensive political power that is, again, afforded to the governor's office. So the only reason that Republicans try to do this is in anticipation of what could be a Democratic Party victory. Now, again, it is a state that Donald Trump won by roughly 13 points. But Republicans probably do remember that it wasn't too long ago that Donald Trump also won Iowa by roughly a similar amount, roughly 10 points in the 2016 presidential election. But just 2 years later in 2018, the Democrats would go on to get Iowa down to a margin of less than 3 points across the state. And it jeopardized the Republicans who had the incompetency factor in this race because Fred Hubble put up a good fight against Kim Reynolds in this race, marking the closest competition for Democrats, where they lost a governor's race in quite some time. In the state of Iowa, as won a lot of states that Donald Trump had won in 2016, 2020, and also 2024, which to be honest, is kind of shocking when you look at it. But, however, next year, Republicans see that there is an immense opportunity for Democrats in the governor's race because of Democratic candidate Rob Sand, who, despite the Republicans winning the governor's office in Iowa in 2018, that when it came down to the statewide election of state auditor, the Democrats defeated the Republican incumbent by roughly 5 points. Fast forward to 4 years later, the Democrats would do it again with Rob Sand, who came into the state auditor race and ended up winning it in 2022 by a very narrow margin, despite Iowa on the governor's level in 2022 voting for the Republicans by over 18 points. The reason why Republicans are limiting the power of the governor's office is because they do believe that Rob Sand could very much win this race. And by God, wouldn't that just be hilarious? Anyways, it's because of this fear that they are preemptively stripping away the power from an office that voters have yet to decide on because their expectation in this race is that Rob Sand might actually be the only Democrat who can be successful in this race. And so far, he is outraising the Republicans. He's outperforming the Republicans. And Iowa, amongst many other states in the country, are one of the states that have been impacted by Donald Trump's tariffs and economic decisions to the highest degree. And that is something that can be a motivational factor in its own right that benefits Democrats tremendously because voters are so fed up and angry with existing Republican leadership. And getting back to this point again about Iowa, this playbook from Republicans in deciding to strip political power from offices that they expect to lose is actually not that different than what we've seen before. We've seen this multiple times when there was a Democratic wave, especially in 2018. The state of Wisconsin did the exact same thing. Republicans stripped away the political powers of the Democrats, prepped the bills right before the election. It confirmed their suspicions, and they passed it right after the election. And then the Republican governor signed into law additional pieces of legislation that stripped his own power and what would be the Democratic governor's power in the state. Essentially, the Republicans used their supermajority that they only had through a means of gerrymandering the state into fucking oblivion and stripped away the Democratic governor who was duly elected by his citizens And they made it so that Democratic governor would have significantly less control. But in the lead up to that election, these bills were proposed, and they were a big piece. They were a big conversation at the time that indicated that the Wisconsin Republicans likewise were reading the writing on the wall of imminent failure amongst voters. Scott Walker, who was going for a third term, was expecting to win this race, but many Republicans in Washington, D.C., and the state capitol, and across Wisconsin, likewise knew together that Scott Walker would not be winning re-election. The North Carolina Republicans did the exact same thing most recently in 2024. They stripped power away from the governor's office and the attorney general's office with pieces of legislation that they had built up before the election and ended up implementing after that November cycle after Democrats actually won those races too, which again just shows how fucking corrupt the GOP really is. Like they do not care about the voters remotely. Anyway, North Carolina's governor's race went blue. The attorney general's race went blue. And believe it or not, an interesting nugget of electoral history is that Republicans haven't held the attorney general's office in North Carolina since 1896. There has not been a single time in the 20th or 21st century that Republicans of North Carolina have held the attorney general's office, which is just so fascinating to me. Although, again, the Republicans, even as recent as last year in 2025, were trying to limit some powers in North Carolina. North Carolina trial judges on in Wednesday. I'll have the article put up here. They threw out another Republican. This was in December, so they threw out another Republican attempt to strip the governor of his authority to appoint state board of election members, declaring that a law shifting the task to the state auditor is unconstitutional. Superior Court judges Edwin Wilson and Lori Hamilton said the law would interfere with the governor's constitutional duties because of course it would. Other elected executive officials assisted the governor in executing state law, but the governor bears the ultimate duty of faithful execution. They wrote blah 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 blah. The decision also cited rulings on previous unsuccessful attempts by the General Assembly to strip powers away from the governor. Um, so like even now, after the Republicans have lost, they're still trying to find ways to strip more powers from duly elected Democrats, which is what fascists do. But anyways, since late 2016, the Republican-dominated legislature has sought to erode or eliminate a governor's authority to appoint the board that administers elections in the ninth largest state. So take that how you will. The point is that the Republican Party in the state exists under Democratic leadership. They realized this cycle probably wasn't going to end. If Josh Stein, who won by 15 in 2024, and Jeff Jackson, who won by a considerable amount, given that it was a Trump state, those victories are ones that the Republicans realized meant that their political careers probably weren't going to end just after 2024. And so they stripped the power of these elected officials because they were worried about what they might be able to do in reaction to the GOP with said political power. But getting back to Iowa, I actually think this is a bit of, a unique circumstance because the Iowa Republicans aren't necessarily waiting until November to act upon this. They filed the House Bill 2413 that says that any of these new major administrative rules that agencies are going to implement are ones that the state assembly have to sign off on. And, as much as the House leader is denying that this is anticipation of a Democrat winning the general election, let's just be very clear about this. There is no reason that someone of their own party would be trying to strip the future governor under their party of any political power if they were confident that their party was going to win. It is different from Wisconsin and North Carolina in that those states did it after the election, but these Iowa Republicans are probably seeing something similar to what the Democrats and those states are in this state, which is that there is immense opportunity for Democrats to do quite well in Iowa. And these elections that have been taking place in the state certainly have shown it when you're taking a look at elections in Iowa, not just in 2026, but even back in 2025 in the state, where Republicans were facing off in quite a number of special elections. A great example of this would be Iowa Senate District 35. This is a Senate district that Republicans won in 2022 with 60% of the vote. She became lieutenant governor in December of 24, and it forced the special election 8 days after Trump was inaugurated as president. In those 8 days after Democrats flipped the seat from Republican plus 20 to Democrat plus 3. 4 points, sorry. Actually, 21-25 rather, 21 to 25 point swing from the 2024 presidential election. Donald Trump won the seat by 21, and it continued in Iowa House District 100, a district that voted for Trump in 2024, where the Republicans defeated the independent candidate, who actually fares better than the Democrats here with 68% of the vote. Blaine Watkins would be elected with just 52% of the vote, a 17-point difference from the last election. And it continued when you look at election results like these. Iowa House District 78, which was a safe Democrat seat. Clamara Harris won this 65% of the vote. Angel Ramirez, in an election 3 months after Trump was inaugurated, won 79% of the vote, a 14-point increase. As it continued, Iowa State District 1, a district that previously was held by Republicans, flipped to the Democrats, ending the supermajority in the Iowa State Senate for Republicans. And it just continued and continued even into 26. When we think about elections we've already seen this year in the state of Iowa, when you go back and look at 2026, there have been races statewide. There have been races that have mattered when it comes down to special elections. And those results in those elections have shown Democrats to improve in these districts. And now the GOP is trying to strip away the governor of having political power, which means they're terrified, strictly. I mean, why wouldn't they be? The GOP on a national scale sees what's going to happen to them in November, and they're terrified, which is why these Iowa Republicans are being so aggressive, and their attempt to strip incoming Democrat, again, who hasn't even been voted in yet, of any type of potential power. They are showing you a hand, and they can deny it publicly or not, but from a very logical point of view, no reason to say you want to take power away from any Republican government in the state unless you believe the governor will not be Republican come this November. Because Donald Trump might have won the state by roughly 13 points, almost every special election in Iowa we have seen has seen over a 13-point swing. And that is something that just, quite frankly, cannot be ignored by the modern day Republican Party, by Donald Trump and his advocates in the Oval Office, because if it is, this seat could very seriously turn blue. It almost did in 2018, the same year that Rob Sand won statewide by roughly 4 points against an incumbent Republican in the race. Not to mention that Democrats won 75% of congressional representation and were 4 points off a 100% of congressional representation in the state of Iowa in 2018. Fast forward to right now, Iowa is certainly in play for the Democrats, and it is Republicans who are showing that they believe that is the case. So where does that leave us? I would just say to keep your eyes peeled on Iowa. Let's closely watch this race, but as it stands right now, Republicans pushing this bill is the clearest indication that internally they are worried and they are scared about what might happen in the state for the 2026 midterm elections going into next year's governor race, especially. Um, I genuinely do believe that the Republican Party as a whole is going to get eviscerated in the midterms. They're for sure going to lose the House. The Senate, honestly, in certain cases, may be closer than we may think. Uh, if we'll win the majority, but as if it continues as it is, who knows? But anyways, that's all I have for today. Hope you enjoyed, and peace.